I'm Dr. Scott Lyons, and you're watching or listening to The Gently Used Human. Have you ever found yourself in a situation where you felt small, invisible, or unable to fully express yourself? Where the weight of societal expectations or past traumas seem to silence your voice and diminish your presence? Today, we're exploring the transformative power of reclaiming our space and amplifying our authentic self with Eliza VanCort. Eliza is a multifaceted force, an author, facilitator, speaker, podcaster, and survivor. With a background in both performing arts and political science, she has become a renowned communication strategist and trainer, empowering others to stand tall in an often unnerving world. Her best-selling book, A Women's Guide to Claiming Space, Stand Tall, Raise Your Voice, Be Heard, is a transformational and intersectional tome that inspires all. In this episode, we delve into the art of effective communication, the role of intuition and connection, and the profound impact of body language and vocal control. Eliza shares her personal journey of overcoming a devastating brain injury that compromised her ability to communicate and how that experience fueled her passion for helping others find their voice. We'll explore the power of reclaiming suppressed parts of ourselves, the significance of accountability in repair and relationships, and the transformative nature of acting as a means to understand human behavior. Get ready to embark on a journey of self-discovery where we embrace the courage to live life unapologetically, reclaim our souls, and expand our understanding of what it truly means to be human. Let's get this going. Eliza, thank you so much for being on The Gently Used Human. We are so excited to have you. You are what I believe they call in the field a communication guru. And I'm excited to talk to you about all things communication, all things space and claiming it and reclaiming it and then reclaiming it again, probably, because that shit's hard. And
that shit is hard.
That shit is hard. Welcome, though, love. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm truly, really excited to be here.
So let's start with communication, because is anyone good at it?
Yeah, actually, I think some people are good at it. Most people who are good at it don't know why they're good at it, but they are good at it. And most people who aren't good at it kind of know what they're not doing right, but they have no idea how to fix it. So it's kind of this amorphous thing that we tend to do in an automatized way. And what I like about the work that I do, which I find that I geek out on, is how do you break it down for people so that actually they can do it in the way they want to do it, rather than why did that come out of my mouth that way? You know?
Bless you. That's all I can say. I feel like communication, yes, I think there are people innately good at it. And you're right. They don't know why. It just happens. And other people who are many other people who aren't. And before we talk about like what gets in the way of communication and the skill building, let's kind of break it down of like the people who are good at it. What do you see that they have that they don't necessarily even know they have in terms of skill sets?
Well, they have a way of really intuitively connecting with people. They're not really watching themselves. They're very focused on their audience, and their audience feels seen and listened to. I actually have a kind of hilarious story I could share with you about.
Yeah.
Okay, so back in the day, in the Stone Ages, when Clinton was way before Clinton was running for office, I had a friend who was in the RNC. Mm-hmm. And he actually was there when Sarah Palin was running for vice president.
Bless.
And yes. He actually ended up jumping parties. That's another story. But anyway, I was interning at the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee. He was at the RNC. Wow. And he called me up after Sarah Palin did her talk at the convention and told me that her monitor had gone down. And that everybody was dying because she was just up there like words and lipstick on a pig and all the things. And they were just sitting there going, oh God, like, what are we going to do? No one's there going to turn this off. And the audience was losing their mind, clapping. They were so excited. They then went back and took the part out. They started pulling out what part of the speech was the part where she didn't have her monitor, where she just had to riff. Yeah. That had the highest ratings. People were most excited. But here's the crazy part. Then they pulled out the text that she said, and it was something called amazing speech, which basically is, instead of I walked out the door, I went to the store, I got some food, I paid with my wallet, I got home, I realized I'd lost my wallet. It's like, I lost my wallet, I walked to the store, I realized, it's a maze. made no sense. It was completely unintelligible. And everyone was like, yes, Sarah, we love you, because it didn't matter, unfortunately, the content of what she was saying. It was just the feeling that she was invoking in people made them love her. And good communicators can have really bad content and still make people listen to the general principle of what they're saying, which is actually part of why I'm so passionate about this, because I really want the people who have good content to be able to express themselves.
So being able to be like intuitive and then connecting is a big part of communication, as opposed to necessarily the content or the order of the words per se. That's so interesting. I wouldn't think of that as like the first thing that comes to mind when I think of good communicators.
Oh yeah. They found that 7% of people's decision-making processes about if they're going to receive what someone's saying has to do with their words. And the rest is body language and vocal control.
Well, shit.
I know, right?
I mean, the very things that I think are stripped away from us, especially as like kids, of like, stay in your seat, don't have any, like, other people are controlling our bodies. Like, you and I both have an acting background, so I think we can geek out on this. Like, the range of the human experience of vocal capacity to have like so many different sounds, and yet we smush it to sound like in this very short range of normal.
Totally. 100%.
Holy shit. So basically, the things that are so primary in communication are the things that have been sort of smushed down.
Yeah. And there are lots of things that smush it down, like trauma smushes it down, right? Like,
that.
Being in any kind of targeted group smushes it down. Like,
for sure.
That one teacher who made you cry smushes it down. Like, there's so many things that smush it down. And I think a lot of what you do when you're teaching communication is helping people tap into that part of themselves that went in that little room in their head full of shame and shut the door and said, no one wants to listen to me. And you kind of knock on the door and say, like, it's okay to come out. You have things to say.
Oh, that's so sweet. So how do we amp up or reclaim or pump up like then vocal intonation and body language?
Well, what I do is break it down into little tiny baby steps.
Okay.
I think that the big thing that people do with communication that's incorrect is they give these things like, be more natural.
Be authentic.
Be yourself. And when people are nervous, they're barely ever themselves. They're anxious selves. So I have a physicality piece that I talk about, literally, how do you move your body in space?
Love it.
And so, for example, if somebody's power playing you can just stop moving your head. Moving your head is like, if you don't move your head, it's a gigantic power move.
Can you move your head? I'm now feeling very scared inside.
You can smile, you can not smile, you can look away, and it's still going to freak people out because as humans, we make people feel better by affirmation nodding. We go, okay, I got you. Sometimes when we're nervous, someone yells at us and we go, yeah, keep it coming. And you can learn these simple things like, oh, someone's coming after you, stop moving your head. And suddenly you're saying, even if you don't have the words, you need to stop. So there are all these little things you can do. And then the flip side of that is your vocals. How do you use any kind of simple little vocal technique to make a difference? So when we get nervous, we get really fast. We start to talk really fast. And then it's like a slow train wreck. It's just, our brains can't keep up. We're done. But if you just slow down when you're nervous, that makes you sound more authoritative. So there are just all these little things you can do. And I just break them down into component parts. And eventually people can learn them, internalize them, and do them in an automatized way where they're in control of that, rather they're in their emotional life controlling the way that the words come out of their mouths.
Brilliant. What would you even say is like the ultimate goal of communication? I mean, I think people might assume, but I think it's important to break down as well.
Yeah. I mean, I think the problem with communication when it's compromised is that what you really want people to hear is not received the way you want it to be received. And I think that there are so many things that get in the way of that. For example, even just the way you look. If you look a certain way, if you're going into a place where, for example, you are a person of color and you're dealing with racism, people may not hear you. And it has nothing to do with anything but the way your face looks to them.
Yeah.
And so there are ways that you can use your communication to overcome those barriers. So the question is, are you being received the way you want to be received, despite all of the barriers that you or society is throwing up in front of you?
That's such a big question.
Yeah, it is. It really
is it accessible?
Yeah, it's so much easier. Right. Because think about it, like, do better in math. Like, that doesn't help, right? That's just like, okay, well, now I'm going to just keep sucking, right? But if someone's like, let's get these beans and put them on the counter and show you that beans plus 2 beans are 4 beans, you're like, oh, this isn't that hard, right? So I think the problem is most people who talk about communication don't have an acting background. They don't actually spend their time breaking down what is this little minutia of human behavior that I'm seeing that's making people respond this way to me. And if you can break that down for people, then they go, oh, this isn't some mysterious amorphous process. I can do this, which is just so amazing. I mean, I go every year to MIT and I work with these super amazing kids who are kids who, a lot of them come from families where they're the first to go to college.
Wow.
Or they come from really impoverished backgrounds. So these are kids who are there because they happen to have more horsepower than anyone in the population, but they've had very few things handed to them, and they don't always know the social mores of MIT because it's based on this very kind of archaic white Anglo-Saxon, very wealthy culture.
Yeah.
And so I go in there and I help them learn certain skills around public speaking and persuasive communication. But they come in and they're thinking, I'm overwhelmed. I feel like I can't communicate with this person and with my professor. We break it down and they go, oh, okay, I get this. Even though throughout their lives, they've been trained in different ways to communicate, but not one that is received in that particular academic setting.
What are some of the common things you break down and with them?
So what I usually do is I spend the first 20 minutes in my workshops just going through physicality and voice. And I talk about, for example, cadence. I talk about volume, my personal favorite, because people always tell you in communication classes to get louder. Yeah. And actually, it's often more powerful to get quiet because as human beings, we build intimacy by telling secrets. Yeah. So that pulls people in. So little things like that. And then I go over something called high and low playing behaviors by this brilliant woman from Stanford called Deborah Grunfield. You should look her up. It's an outgrowth of her work. And it's really about how do you make sure that you are in your power when you're speaking and that you're sending the message about how you want to be received, not just about the words, but also where are you in this power dynamic? And that to me is the kind of the HTML, the coding of communication. And it's something that once you see it, you'll never unsee it the rest of your life. And you will never go into a situation feeling out of control because you can read the body language and you are in control of your own body language.
Her work is like power poses, right?
No.
No, that's not her.
Not the power poses.
Not the power poses.
That's Ann Cuddy.
Nor the Power Rangers.
No, I mean, God bless Ann Cuddy. There's a lot of controversy.
Oh, that's right.
It's more like high playing behaviors would be graceful hand movements, right? If you've ever seen two people arguing and one person, you're across the street watching them, one person's jerky hand movements and the other has fluid hand movements. You don't need to know what they're saying. You know who's winning. You just know who's winning just by their body language. Or little things like, if you want to power play someone, then don't look at them when they talk to you. I mean, think about it. When a kid comes in with their parents are like, look at my drawing. And the parent goes, go ahead, look at it. Go put it over there. I'll look at it later. That's saying, I'm so powerful, I don't need to attend to you. Now, I don't recommend a lot of these things unless you are literally in a power dynamic where someone's trying to steal your power. But there are times in society where people try to do that, and understanding if you're nervous about having the right words, how to take that power back without ever having to utter a word that says, hey, stop power playing me, is really amazing and kind of magical.
And that's a big part of your work too, is like claiming or reclaiming power and space. I mean, you kind of wrote a book about it.
Kind of wrote a book about it.
Your book kind of did a big deal kind of book.
Kind of a big deal.
Kind of a big deal. your book is A Woman's Guide to Claiming Your Space.
A Woman's Guide to Claiming Space. Stand tall, raise your voice, be heard.
Space, not your space. It's
Yeah.
space. I think I added the your.
Everybody adds the your. I think that should have been the title, but it wasn't.
I want to take a moment to give a loud shout out to the Embody Lab, which is one of the most incredible resources for body-based and somatic therapies. This show is all about healing, and the Embody Lab does exactly that. Whether you're on your own journey of transformation and discovery, or enhancing your skill sets in your career as like a coach or a therapist, a body worker, or really any career where you are supporting other gently used humans, the Embody Lab is your place for deep, inspiring, and impactful workshops, certificates, masterclasses, and an incredible community of like-minded folks. I love the Embody Lab, and so do so many other people that call it a platform to come home to over and over again. The Embody Lab is giving my listeners an exclusive offer, a one-time 10% off code to enhance your embodied well-being. All you have to do is go to theembodylab.com and use the code GentlyUse10 at checkout. Did you ever study like in acting, like Laban?
No, I did not.
Okay, I'm a big Laban nerd. Like, whenever someone talks about space, it just like is my love language. Because he deconstructed like the ways in which we experience space, and I love how that kind of parallels with a lot of like elements of somatic psychology, where we actually, what happens and often with trauma is that we lose our sense of dimensionality, lose our sense of space. And Laban and other people like Anne Bogart, Mary Overly, who viewpoints in acting, really unpacked also like has as space as the medium of relationship.
Yes.
And so like I just geek out on anything space. So I was super excited when we were going to have a conversation about all the ways you talk about reclaiming space or claiming space. So I just want to say that.
I mean, I don't know if you know much, but your viewers may not know a lot about my background, but I was kidnapped 3 times by my paranoid schizophrenic mother. Yeah. And I was taken across the country by truck, from truck stop to truck stop to truck stop, from New York to California, hitchhiking. Yeah. And what happened on that trip made me really start to conflate invisibility with safety. I thought, if I can just shrink, if I can just be totally invisible, I'll be safe. Yeah. And, so many people do that, and it takes a long time to realize that being invisible isn't safe. It's just so dangerous. And that was part of why I wanted to write this book, is that I've been invisible. I've tried to shrink from the world. I used to hide behind a curtain of hair, and I wouldn't look. I was like, I just didn't want to peek out from it. And learning how to claim my space, which to me is living the life of your choosing unapologetically and bravely, has really transformed my life. And so I wanted to share all the different techniques that I learned to get there, because I wish someone had told me it would have taken me a lot less time.
So you had this whole like body experience of like having to shrink yourself to or become invisible to be safe. I know this might sound like a strange follow-up question, but was that the experience of others then, that you were small and invisible?
I think when I was very little, it was. My big sister in the Big Sister, Big Brother program recalled coming in to meet me, and I was sitting on the floor coloring, and she said, let's go do all these things. She's from a big Irish family. Like, you gotta do stuff. When things are bad, you do stuff. And I'd just been all across the country against my will, leaving my home. And I was like, I'm not going anywhere. And she sat on the floor with me. And that's another thing about the book is really, how do you interact with other people's space? She got on the floor with me, and she said, okay. And we colored for hours. And I talked to her more than I talked to anyone else. She ended up being, I was a flower girl in her wedding. She was there after my accident. I had a really life-threatening accident. And those kind of moments, I think people said, you were just such a vulnerable, scared little kid. I think in high school, people would have probably said, oh, she was out there. She was just doing her thing. But internally, I really felt like I was still doing a lot of these mechanisms, particularly that women do to try to stay small. Like I would be goofy. I would diminish my opinion with jokes, all of these things that we do to stay safe. But in the end, they actually make us vulnerable.
I've heard that referred to before, I think, is as like the Alice in Wonderland phenomenon, where it's like internally really small, and then to try to correct it might get really goofy and big.
Right.
And then there's this conflict of size or the way we occupy space.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, it's they talk about masking with different kinds of autism being on the spectrum that way. I have friends who talk about masking who are on the spectrum. There's a different kind of masking, I think, that extroverts learn to do if they're suffering from a lot of trauma, which is, I'm great. Everything's great. I'm going to just be awesome. And no one will ever know I'm dying inside. And, it took me a long time to be able to cry, to be able to say, I'm not okay with this, it was really, and be able to say, that was traumatic. That was hard. That wasn't an easy thing for me. And I think that so much of the world, I think, expects us to compulsively lie. I actually talk about that in our book, just people say, how are you doing? And you're supposed to say, I'm fine. How are you?
Yeah.
Even if your aunt just died, which is a lie unless you hated your aunt. So, we're supposed to basically go around compulsively lying all the time. And that's all masking, often because nobody's happy all the time. It just doesn't exist. Our life is full of happiness and joy and sadness and tragic events, and then neutrality. And that's real. And I think we put out so many messages to the contrary that it can make people feel like they have to put on a show to say that they're normal when really nobody's living that life.
And I really hear like in the line or masking, we're minimizing ourselves, minimizing our true experience. And that's not just it. Like we actually minimize the space we take up or the volume we present in the world by this process. Wow.
Absolutely. I think that you lose a small piece of your soul every time you try to be someone who you're not for the sake of others.
Yeah. Oof. Where'd all those pieces go?
I think it takes a long time. I think we spend our lifetime, once we figure it out, trying to go back and reclaim them.
Yeah.
One of my friends was talking to me once, and she was in a relationship with somebody who is who's Native American, and he told her this thing that in their tribe, and I wish I could remember the name of it, when someone has done something wrong, the whole tribe gets together in a circle if they've determined the person really did something wrong. And the person who's been wrong says, give me back my soul. And the person who wronged them says, I give you back your soul.
Wow.
Yeah, it's so powerful.
Wow. It's so visceral.
It's so visceral. And the whole community is there like witnessing this like really penance in the most profound way. Because so much of the time, I think when we're wronged, it's not the wrong that dogs us. It's the feeling that the person who did it never validated what happened.
Yeah. Have you ever done that as a practice, like whether with someone or in your imagination, like that sort of give me back or that sort of reclaiming process in that way?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
I definitely did. I mean, I went through a long time where I really wasn't in my power. And once I got to that place, I realized that there were certain people I had to have conversations with about what had happened. And until I did, even if, I think when you do that, you can't go in expecting they will validate you because they're probably not going to. You're doing it. But if you go in doing it for yourself, and knowing you may not hear what you need to, but you've said what you need to, I think is so powerful. But I also want to stress that I am deeply imperfect and I have done that with others. I had the biggest mistake of my career. I still think about it all the time. I was an early young boss at my acting studio and I messed up with somebody who was working with me. it wasn't the worst thing in the world, but it was a boundary violation. I kind of did the sneaky thing with a play, which doesn't sound like a big deal, but if you're in the arts, you know how important boundaries are.
Yeah.
And I took them aside, and eventually about a year later, once I'd gone through a lot of work myself, and when I was more in my center, and I said, I just want to tell you what I did was really wrong. You were right. I was your boss. I should never have, not talked to you directly. And I'm very, very sorry. People who are listening and think, what did she do? Literally, I did a bunch of rehearsals without telling them on a play that they were directing because I didn't want them to know that they were sucking. But that was not like the right thing to do. And it was so undermining and so not okay. And I was a people pleaser and I wasn't able to do it directly. And I said, I'm really sorry. I should never have done that. I should have come to you. It was undermining to you and your authority. And, I think it's really important when you do something like that, because it helps the other person not feel crazy,
And this is a really interesting thing too, about like the difference between accountability and blame. Like where accountability, I see it as like really the pathway towards repair. And it doesn't say like, I'm responsible for your feelings, but it says I understand them and my actions have a consequence and I recognize that too.
That's right.
And my actions can be interpreted and your interpretation is yours and I'm here with you.
Yes, that's right. That's exactly right. And I think so much of the time when we're working on, repair.
Oh, repair.
We're sitting there and we're going, well, what did that person do to me? And do I really need to? And and the reality is, I think we get so caught up in right and wrong and we don't really realize that in any interaction, there's always going to be accountability a little bit, almost any interaction. There's going to be accountability that you could have done something differently, even if it was 2%. And we can't, we have to take responsibility for that 2%, but hopefully the other person will take responsibility for the 98, which often doesn't happen, but we hope so.
So how do we, going back to claiming space, claiming our space, like how do we begin? Is it with physical space or emotional space, or guide us?
Well, claiming space is living the life of your choosing unapologetically and bravely. And to me, bravery isn't the absence of fear. That's not brave at all. Bravery is fear meeting action. I mean, to me, there's nothing brave about doing something that doesn't scare you. It's just not brave at all.
Yeah.
So I had a bike accident, among all the other fun things that happened. I had a bike accident and I actually lost my ability to communicate was severely compromised, and I had no ability to remember anything, and I had to rebuild my communication. And I was really watching people. I'm an extrovert, so I love to talk, and I couldn't because I get tired, which was a weird experience for me. So I had to shut up and watch people, and I learned a lot during that time. Between that and my teaching, I really kind of started to get a handle on, well, what is it that makes one person walk in a room and they're heard and seen and believed? And somebody else says the same words and nobody's listening. And so I broke it down into 5 things. I kept looking for the one thing. Of course, that's nothing's that simple ever. So, and what I found is physicality and voice. People who build community. They just feel better. Maya Angelou has this great thing. I'm never alone because when I walk in the room, everyone who loves me walks in with me, like community. Also, how do we deal with those boulders that will fall on us? We all have boulders. And, a lot of people are told, oh, just get rid of them, you'll get over it. And what I've learned is that people who are really, really good at claiming space, take those boulders, whittle them down, put them in their pocket, and they don't try to get rid of them. They go, oh, I've been through this. And they touch the little pebble and go, I can handle this. Or, oh, I miss that person. And that's okay. That's part of me. So we carry these hard things as our lessons. They also know how to shut down aggressors and people who are going to make them small. And finally, they're intersectional. And in that, I mean, they don't just try to uplift people who look like them. They try to uplift people who are very different from them and have a very inclusive group of friends and mentees. And those people, if they had those 5 things, not that they had mastered them because it's impossible, but, physicality and voice, community, all of those things, if they could just be mindful of them, they were the people who were the movers and shakers who changed the world. So I wrote a book and I broke the book into those 5 different different categories. And then I broke down, how do you achieve those things? And that to me is not a simple, this is how you claim space, but the reality is, the good things in life usually are a little more complex than one little sentence.
I think so. I enjoy the nuance.
Me too.
I mean, but I wonder if because both of us, again, have this background in acting, I wonder if we were emerged, or if we were natural deconstructionists, or if that emerged out of the training of acting.
I mean, I think that when you're an actor, you got to learn, especially if you're an acting teacher.
Oh, yeah.
You learn to viscerally attend to human behavior in a way that very few people do, especially if you do directing. You have to be able to say, oh, when this person twists their arm this way and then looks to the side, I'm hoping the audience will feel this.
Yeah.
You got to understand human behavior real well.
Yeah.
To be able to do that.
Yeah. I think it's weird for people, and I don't say it too often because I think it's a far gap for people to understand. It's like most of my work as a therapist, did not come, or my training or my understanding didn't come from the 7 years of grad school. It came from the years I worked as a director and actor of deconstructing human behavior and being with people in the moment, in the impulses of it.
You will never meet anyone more aware of human behavior, of what they're seeing around them and what they're feeling, than a well-trained actor.
Yeah. It's kind of annoying sometimes too.
It is. It's really, you're never able to just sit there. You're often watching oh, that's an interesting dynamic over there at that table. I wish you would just do this. I think she would probably shut him down. Yeah, no, it's absolutely true. And it's just, it's so powerful. And that's why when I taught my course in Ithaca, I had people who were non-actors and actors alike, and everybody, the actors, went on and did really cool things. And, one of my actors was just at the Oscars and blah, blah, blah. But the people who were lawyers or teachers or, therapists, they all said that it helped them as well, because they just got a more profound understanding of human behavior. And that's the juicy, yummy stuff that I love so much about teaching acting, is the transformation people feel, not just with their creativity, but on a personal and profoundly deep level with who they are and what they see the world is like.
Yeah, I think back, I never really get to talk about this stuff, so I hope it's all right with you.
Oh, no, I am geeking out. So I never talk about it either. Everybody wants to talk about my book, and I love my book, but I've been an acting teacher for 20 years. I'm doing it again now. It's
amazing.
My joy.
I remember, because you and I were talking about this before we started filming, my background is in Grotowski, which is very physical theater, very raw, primal. We often had to take naked acting classes, screaming, and it was wild. It was absolutely a wild 4 years that I cannot believe how much I paid for, or my parents paid for with me. In retrospect, I think it cost more than my entire 4 different 5 grad school programs. Thank you, NYU.
Thanks, NYU. Thanks, private school.
Thanks, private school. Even with scholarships.
Right.
But I remember going, oh, what I think I'm getting most out of this, because I knew I didn't want to be an actor.
Right.
I knew it, and I knew my time in the arts would probably be short. But I was I want this. I want this so bad, because I always had this question of what is it to be human? What is it to be human? And I don't know any other field that broke it down and explored it, not even psychology.
No.
The range of what it is to be human.
Absolutely. That's what actors do. I think so much of it comes from, I was talking about communication and being afraid, but that really is an outgrowth of my belief that when we're little, we do all this make-believe because we're trying to play different roles. What are all the different ways we can be human? Can I be an old lady one day, and then I'm going to get married the next, then I'm a cop, and then I'm a robber, then I'm whatever, right? And then there's a certain point where people walk up to us and they say, you're really old for make-believe. You really need to not do that. And that is the first thing that goes into a little room in your head, shuts the door and goes to sleep. And an acting teacher's job is come play again. It's okay to play. And I think that all of that exploration that we have as young people, because you can't live every life, actors can live every life. We can play and explore other people. That's why you hear people who are actors saying, oh, I studied surgeons for a year before I did my surgeon part, because they get to imagine, it's really, and the thing that I find actually really interesting about acting is when you get to play someone who is evil.
That's
because
primarily what I got cast as. So.
Right. And I love it because, I work very hard in my life to live a life of integrity and kindness. It's very important to me. And I think everything you do in life actually does form a ripple effect that can, go out in the world. And I kind of believe in Star Wars in the Force, like what side of the Force are you on? But you get to pretend. You get to and it's not like we don't have that in us. We're just telling that part, hey, don't do that. And you get to play. And I think that is another really magical part of acting is the ability to explore parts of yourself that you couldn't do in any other way without being a very horrible, evil human being.
Yeah. I think moments ago when you were talking about when people shut down the imagination, it really dawned on me in that moment. I was like, oh my gosh, they're shutting down our mechanism for exploring our sense of humanness.
Yes.
Ouch.
Ouch.
Ouch. Yeah. And then, of course, when we get older and we feel kind of minimized, or we don't feel we feel bored, or we don't know, there's a sense of longing for more.
Yes.
And I think so often we might go have these midlife crises. We go do that one thing, or the behaviors get extreme, but really it's a return of the permission and the support and the space to explore the expansive range of what it is to be human.
Yeah. I mean, it's what you're talking about is why everybody loves commercials where they have some guy in a hot car, going down some crazy road, and you hear the voiceover going, stay within the lines. And the guy's like, and he's going around all these corners, because all of us secretly don't want to stay within the lines. And we've just been told to stay within the lines. And some of us do. I mean, and it's hard. I mean, it's part of life is learning how to figure out what lines you want to put your toe out of,
Were you ever good at coloring in the lines?
I sucked at coloring in the lines.
Too.
I was terrible. I was like, you know what? That head could become a hat. That arm, if it had two arms, it'd be cooler.
Right? And then we got labeled as obstinate.
Right. Oppositional.
Oppositional defiant disorder, where it's no, I just don't want to color in your lines.
Right, exactly. You know what? You're not following my directions, and therefore you're oppositional. Or maybe I just don't like your rules.
Or maybe I'm just trying to explore humanity, asshole.
Exactly. Listen, I'm getting in touch with my inner philosopher. Okay? Just leave me alone.
I mean, this is why I really love improv. I mean, to this day, I think every profession should have improv classes, which include work on body language and vocal work like you do. I'm so excited you're teaching again, by the way. Thank you.
So excited. Yeah, it's been a long time. And I was like, I'm not doing that. After when we shut down during the pandemic, I was like, I'm done. I'm never doing that again. I'm exhausted. I've been doing it for over 20 years.
Right.
And my friends were like, good luck with that.
They know you.
Yeah. Totally.
It's hard to give up. And it's so fun to see the I love your gesture of beckoning people back to their play, back to their freedom.
Yeah. Totally. I mean, we get to live this one life and it's so unbelievably short.
Yeah.
Why shouldn't we learn more about ourselves, other people, and get to pretend we're other people? Live more than one life. If you're an actor, you get to be a spy one day,
Yeah. I'm here for it.
I'm totally here for it. And it helps people overall in their lives. I mean, it really... everybody who takes my class was always talking about how it transformed their whole life. And I think it's because acting is just so much about human behavior and being self-aware. I've done a lot of therapy and a lot of acting, and I'd say they're both pretty damn comparable in terms of what I got out of them.
Oh, yeah. I mean, unbeknownst to most people in my therapy sessions, I would do a lot of the acting practices that I learned in undergrad. And the even improv practices. I made this very well-known CEO of a corporate company who I just thought it was like, we have very different personalities, and I made them play tag with me through their entire office.
I love that so much. I could cry. That's so awesome.
And then it got more diverse of like, we can play tag, but you can never go in the direction you want to go. The moment you make a decision of this is how I'm going to go chase them, you have to go find a different way to chase me. Like, you have to roll on the floor, or you have to do cartwheels. I had a lot of fun.
So cool. Yeah. I mean, first of all, I want to do that.
That's great. We'll do it together.
Let's do it sometime.
Okay.
Secondly, I invented a semester through the Meisner technique because Meisner has this thing where he's like, okay, now we're all going to do emotional preparation, and then we're going to come in and do this exercise.
Yeah.
And never taught anybody how to do it.
Mm.
And it was so crazy to me that he expected people to be joyful, rageful, grief-stricken, all of these things, and never taught people how to do it. So I invented this semester, which I use when I coach people.
Yeah.
And the reason I started using it when I coach is because one of my clients was a business professor and one of my students. And he said, Eliza, ever since I took emotional prep, I never go into a meeting anxious again.
Wow.
And I always joke, I'm like, it's not a lifetime cure. It's a 6-hour cure, but it will help you a lot for 6 hours. You will be under control of your emotional life. And that's one of the such powerful things about acting training is you can teach people how to be in a different state, be in a different way of being when they need to, when it's go time, when they're giving a talk, when they're running a meeting, when they're in a job interview. You can teach them these skills that you just aren't going to learn. I mean, a therapist is probably not going to be like, hey, I'm going to teach you how to go through your, triumph prep in order to feel, confident in order, and guess what? You go to your triumph prep by imagining you're herding sheep. Like, what
is a triumph prep?
So basically I broke emotional prep into 5 things: joy, rage, grief, fear, and sexual arousal. And so what I figured out was that certain preparations, when people go into, so preparation is like a little bubble. You walk into a scene and you're full of this thing, but you don't push it out there. You wait for your partner to poke it and then it comes out. Right. So it's this little bubble.
Like very intimate, but I get it.
Right. So like if I'm doing a scene with you and I think you're going to ask me to marry you, I'm going to prep properly for grief. And so I'm not going to go in, right? So because let's say you're going to break up with me in the scene, right? So I come in, and since I'm an actor, I'm happy to be on stage, so I don't need to prep for joy. I walk in, and then you're like, hey, I'm breaking up, and I prep for grief, and boom. Off comes the sadness, right? So, but what I found was that a lot of people couldn't get to those. And then there are all these subcategories. So triumph is one of them. But what I found was a lot of people couldn't just get to grief or get to joy or get to rage. They would find one emotion and that emotion would be like a gateway to the others. So for example, someone would need to be feeling triumphant, but they couldn't get straight to triumph. They found that they had to do rage first and then go to triumph. And if they could do that, they could feel triumphant, but they couldn't. They had to actually prep for rage. So it's like this whole process of unlocking what emotions make you go where. So I had, students, only sexual arousal could make them happy or sad or whatever. It's fascinating, but it gives you this ability to never go into a situation out of control of your emotions because you know how to click into that prep and be where you need to be for the situation. And, we also teach intentions and get your intention completed in that situation.
Wow, that's so interesting.
It is. It's very nerdy and exciting.
And I appreciate it of just like, again, making the human experience, like really unveiling the nuances of the human experience, because it's like, one might think of like, even in therapy or in self-work of like, I'm really not in touch with my XYZ feelings. Like I'm not in touch with my anger.
Right.
And maybe we do a practice on anger that helps you generate it, or the movements of anger or the facial and breath patterns of anger. Or it sounds like from your experience, sometimes we have to find like the gateway feeling to anger.
Right. Wow. Which can use all those things to get to the anger or whatever. I'm not averse to using Chekhov or anything else to try to get people where they need to go. We actually use something called guided fantasy, which is basically controlling your daydreaming.
I love to daydream. Don't
I
control
love
it.
daydreaming.
Stop controlling my daydreaming.
Well, no, it's more
No,
like
kidding.
you do it by accident and
Yeah.
you learn how to turn it on and off when you
Yeah.
need to.
Yeah. This show is also brought to you by the absolutely stunning and powerful tools of transformation that are created by Omala. Oof, even the name Omala transports you to a place of flow and vitality. These are some of my favorite products ever. They have an amazing color-changing yoga mat that responds to your temperature and presence and reflects back your posture in real time. There's this incredible smelling skin balm candle that heats up to activate all the essential oils and vitamins that your skin has been craving. I mean, look, if I could live in a giant bath of this candle, I would 100% do it. They also have these journals that lead you into profound insight, and then you get to plant those journals to create a stunning flower garden. What? I mean, if that's not deep and inventive, I don't know what is. If you're someone who desires to live a luxurious flow of life and who believes in transformative wellness, then you have to check out Omala. Omala is giving my listeners an exclusive discount to treat yourself to something that is as special as you, boo. All you have to do is go to omala.com, that's OMALA.com, and use the code DrScott10 at checkout. And a portion of every purchase goes to an incredible charity. You got this. And do you teach some of the like reclaiming the space work in your acting classes then? Is that like a big part of it?
Well, what's really funny is that I did not think I did. And then all my students read my book and said, oh, I started reading it. But then like halfway through part 1, I realized it's everything you taught us in class.
That's so interesting.
So yeah, I don't think I realized I was integrating that throughout, but I was. Because you can't really talk about, if you get up with someone and you're doing an exercise and the person, you're doing something called the repetition exercise where you're going back and forth, kind of bashing feelings back and forth. And the person A says, I'm sad. And I look at them and I'm like, no, you're not. You're angry as hell. Like you're angry. And then they go, oh my God, I realize when I'm sad, a lot of the time I'm not. I'm crying because I'm angry and I don't know how to express it.
Wow.
So, it's all of these things that you kind of discover, which happen by accident to make you a better actor, but also kind of help you be a better human.
Yeah. And I think about that. That's such a beautiful point of like, the ways we might mislabel our feeling because it wasn't supported or we deem appropriate and all those things.
Right.
And we're minimizing ourselves in the process by really not claiming what's present.
So true. I mean, and they let me tell the story. I have 2 people who I worked with who were Black men, and they could not get angry on stage. And they're like, I never feel anger. Never. And so I developed this thing where I had them go through, this is years ago before we were talking about microaggressions. Yeah. And I said, I want you to take, anytime someone bothers you, just like 1 to 3, not 10, but 1 to 3. Like if someone takes the coins and throws them on the counter rather than putting them back in your hand, give it a 2 and write down what it was. Yeah. And then I want you to go through and we're going to just log all of that for a day. Yeah. And then before you go on stage, I want you to look at all of that. And they went on. The first person who did it was rageful. And he came up to me afterwards and he said, I'm angry all the time. Oh, and I said, he said, I think I'm just keeping it under wraps because it's so dangerous for me. And I said, appeasement. I can imagine. And so, I've now had a lot of men of color come through the class, and we often, I would say maybe 9 out of 10 of them say, the world is so dangerous for me if I show any anger that I've learned to not even be aware of how angry I am. And this class allowed me to realize that I am angry, and when I'm in a safe situation, express it rather than repress it all the time, which I was doing and it was coming out in other ways in my life that were damaging, like in my frustration at myself, internalized sad, all these things. So it's a powerful thing to start understanding why you feel how you feel.
It's everything. I mean, I think it's such a liberation from that minimization that either other people have or systems or structures have put on us, or we are now putting on ourselves.
Absolutely.
Oof.
Absolutely. I mean, the women in my class repeatedly will say they're frustrated when they're furious.
Mm.
And I'm like, you're not
Mm.
frustrated. You're furious. And they're like, no, I'm not. And then as they get better in their technique, they're like, I am so angry. They're like, whoa, I feel so good.
It's such, yeah. I mean, I think there's just something unique in acting, because you would never, I did it with clients, but like to go through the emotion wheel and actually like invite people into it, to do the breath work of it, or to do the facial and the movements, or the memory things that evoke it, and just like giving people the palette again, the full emotional palette.
Absolutely.
Huge.
It's huge. It's huge. And, I don't know many people who in their lives were completely validated by their parents
Fuck
all
no.
the time, like,
No way.
right. Or who had every teacher was wonderful. Like
Yeah.
I talk in my book about anti-mentors, who
Yeah.
didn't have an anti-mentor. And
Yeah.
so much of, our lives, I think, are getting in touch with these compensatory strategies that we've developed to protect ourselves from the thing that was harming us. And then we find out that compensatory strategy actually now has diminishing returns and is actually making us worse.
Yeah.
And anti-mentors are a huge example of how we walk around and try to kind of compensate and protect ourselves.
Anti-mentors are like people who we expect to be mentors, and then they turn out to do things like that harm us. Is that what an
That is
anti-mentor?
the closest I've ever heard anyone say it who hadn't read like the full chapter on the book. That's incredible, actually. Yeah. So an anti-mentor is somebody who should be your greatest cheerleader.
Okay.
But ends up making you feel small and off balance. And there are several things that make an anti-mentor. The first thing is they're emotional snipers. They know just where to hit you, and you like hang out with them, and then you walk away and you're like, why am I bleeding? Like, what is happening? But they also do things like praise other people, and yet they don't praise you. They'll like brag about your accomplishments, but then they'll go after you for those very accomplishments and kind of dig you. They're the first people we go to when we want support, and yet they're usually the last ones to give it to us. And they engage in a lot of intermittent reinforcement. So, they never praise us. And then every once in a while we get a huge payday. And so we keep coming back over and over again. They use the same tactics that, casinos do, which is why the house always wins,
Oh, I've never heard it paralleled between the psychology of a casino, what a casino does, and particular individuals in our lives. Wow.
Yeah. I mean, I went on a date with a dude with the casino, and he was explaining what they did to keep people in the casinos.
Whoa.
And I was like, oh, wow, you guys are basically doing what anti-mentors do. You're just making people get that big, you're using intermittent reinforcement, which is so... Yeah. For those who don't know what that is, it's like, they have these mice, they put them in a cage, they give them a little lever, the lever goes down, they get a little tiny pellet of food, and the mouse lives happily ever after. They get a mouse, they put him in the cage, and then every once in a while, a huge payday comes off, but sometimes it has nothing to do with how the mouse hits the lever, nothing to do with their behavior. The mouse will sit there and hit that lever till they starve. Or they will die from overeating because they're just so addicted to that lever. Yeah. And that is what people do who are anti-mentors. Every once in a while you get this huge payday and you don't know why. So you just keep trying and trying and trying. And it's a miserable and unsettling and very damaging relationship. And so many of us have them. That was my first viral post, was actually on anti-mentors, and everybody was like, oh my God, my mom. Oh my God.
I think a lot of people could probably relate to it as a parent, especially.
Yes.
Or sibling.
Unfortunately, our parents tend to be often some of our most damaging anti-mentors, especially because parents are doing it. They're so in your life, and yet they're doing it for the first time. Yeah. So they don't know what they're doing.
Oh my God.
No parent has done it more than once on the first one. So these poor people, I saw this cook that was like, oh, this is like kids, pancakes. You kind of feel like you got to apologize to the first one, and the pancakes all messed up.
Oh, yeah. I can really see that. I can really see that unfolding for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, as a parent, I can say the level of imperfection we have is quite high.
It's
Quite high.
high. It happens quite
It
often.
happens. And I have 5 almost.
You have
So
5. Wow.
yeah.
That's a handful. Literally.
Yeah. My nephew, my 2 sons, my daughter, and now I step kid-ish. So it's a lot.
That's a lot. Wow.
But I'm happy. I mean, I love them. It's a gift. It's a total gift, but it's definitely many opportunities to mess things up.
Yeah. That's a really honest, very transparent way to talk about parenting. I really appreciate that. Normalizing it. Because
well, I mean, all you can do is your best because you're gonna mess it up, you know?
Yeah.
It's like just keep picking yourself up off the floor and learning and growing because you're gonna make mistakes. It's impossible not to.
Well, and it goes back to then like how good are you at communicating and repairing? Because like
exactly.
Yeah. It all comes back to you, the communication guru.
Yeah, well, I try. I really do try. I was on the phone with a friend and she heard me apologize to my kid for making an assumption. And she said, wow, I don't really hear parents do that like that. You just casually was like, oh, I didn't actually realize that. I apologize, blah, blah, blah. And she's like, I wish my parents had done that. And I thought, yeah, that's why I do it. Because we all wish our parents had done that.
Still.
Yeah,
still. They're alive. Yeah.
We're still waiting for, many people are still waiting for their parents to give them back their souls.
It's true. Is there a practice that we can land this session with that you love to guide people through that's like just something we can do together that you love either in reclaiming space or in communication building? Well,
I think that I can give you a really simple one, or I can give you my little thing that I give people for imposter syndrome. Either way is fine. How much time do we have? I have a minute one. So, okay, well, this is the one that I give at the end of my workshops because if I give it in the beginning, people are like, this is super weird. I don't know.
Oh, now I'm into it for sure.
But then I do it and they like it. So I developed this because a friend of mine told me she used it for her trauma patients. She is a trauma therapist. Okay. And I said, I'm going to steal that for my communication patients, clients. And so basically, I found that a lot of times people would come in and they'd be acting like almost like kids, like this nervous thing. And so I said, okay, I want you to imagine that you are walking into the head of a ship and it has a wheel with those little spokes on it.
Yeah. And
next to it, there's a chair. And then I want you to think about how the situation makes you feel. So if you've ever said like, oh my God, that person makes me feel like a kid again, or oh, I feel like a little teenager when I'm around that person, or whatever. Figure out how do I feel when I walk in the room? What age am I going to be? And then imagine that person is sitting there. And for me, it's usually a very traumatized, like 5-year-old. So I walk in and I'm an adult and I see my 5-year-old self driving the ship.
Yeah.
And I walk over to my 5-year-old self and I put my hand on her shoulder and I say, I know you're really scared and you should be because you don't know how to drive this ship, but I do. And I'm supposed to be here because I'm a grown-up and I can do it. So I want you to sit down on this chair and I'm going to keep us safe and I'm going to drive. We're going to be okay. And then you put your hands on the wheel as an adult because that adult person wouldn't be there if they weren't supposed to be. That adult person wouldn't be giving that talk or running that meeting or whatever it is that they're doing that scares them. They're there for a reason and they know it. It's the kid who's scared. Put your hands on the wheel and you look forward. And as soon as you realize you're driving, you step into your adult self and then you go do the thing. And that particular exercise has pretty much killed my one-on-one coaching for about 70% of my clients because they do it. And then they're like, oh, okay. Yeah. And I said to my friend who's a therapist, I said, does this mean we all have multiple personality? And she said, no, we all have inner childs. Don't worry about it.
We all have inner parts, yeah.
It would be the whole population. But that tends to really help people when they're walking in and they're feeling scared. Yeah. You know, our young self often is the one who's saying, you can't, you shouldn't, you're not enough. Yeah. And our adult self knows that's not true. And we just need to make sure the right person is walking into the room.
I love that. Such a good practice. Oh, this has been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much, my love, for being on the Gently Used Human. And where can people find you, your books, your acting classes that clearly everyone should be taking. Your communication workshops you're going to be offering online, which I'm super excited about. Where can they find all of this?
Yeah. So if you go to elizavancourt.com, you will find my all of my communication stuff in my online course. And if you go, there will be a little link there that will take you to actorsworkshop.biz, which is where my all my acting stuff is. You can also just go to actorsworkshop.biz. But the communication course, if you don't have time to take an acting class, will teach you basically everything you need to know to show up the way you want to show up, which is kind of all the things I wish I'd known, but didn't. So I'm passing it on.
And thank you for doing that. I love that. And on socials, where can they find you, follow you?
All of the places, Eliza VanCort. I'm just there. So yeah, check it out. If you want to connect with me though, and actually leave me a message, please do it through Instagram and leave me a comment saying you did it so that I know, because I have a lot of followers on TikTok and I sometimes miss things. So Instagram is the more intimate way to follow me.
Perfect. Will do. All right, my gently used humans. Thank you for tuning in and follow Eliza. Connect. And we love you. Thank you for listening to the Gently Used Human podcast with Dr. Scott Lyons and friends. Visit gentlyused.com for fun extras. And don't forget to spill the tea and gossip about the show with all your friends and frenemies. And you know what? Show us some love by giving us 5 stars and leaving a review in your favorite apps. This helps us connect with all the other gently used humans out there. Oh, and by the way, you look fierce today.